A black belt martial arts master once praised as unbeatable called an elderly black woman, nearly 80 years old, onto the mat just to make her the butt of a joke in front of the entire class. To him, it was a light-hearted demonstration, a harmless prank. But what no one expected was that this very old woman would make him kneel before the entire dojo. "I'm so glad you're here. Let me know where you're watching from, and if you believe that calmness, wisdom, and dignity should never be underestimated just because of age or fragile appearance, then subscribe to the channel today, because tomorrow's story will surprise you even more." Houston, Texas. A quiet Saturday morning like any other in the downtown area. The sun had not fully risen, its light still murky over tin rooftops and the gray concrete walls of old buildings. But inside a black painted glass building tucked into a quiet row of storefronts, the cries of KIAI rang out rapid and fierce like war drums. This was the Iron Fist Martial Academy, a place that trained modern martial arts for teens and young adults. Fluorescent white lights beamed across the red-carpeted floor, punching bags swung with each powerful kick, and the air was thick with the smell of sweat, cleaning fluid, and ambition. In a small corner near the entrance where shoes and sweat towels were usually kept sat a silent figure. An elderly black woman, her short gray hair neat, her face kind but firm, wearing a plain light blue t-shirt and dark slacks, eyes fixed on the training mat. No one knew who she was. No one asked. No one paid attention. For the past 3 months, she had shown up every Saturday morning, always sitting in the same wooden chair next to the locker cabinet, silent like an aged statue, her gaze calm but unreadable. Some new students whispered that she was the janitor's mother. Others guessed she had gotten lost or was simply passing time. But no one imagined that this quiet presence was about to shake the entire dojo. Head coach Brett Kingston, a burly man of about 38 with a high and tight military haircut and tattooed biceps, stepped out from the training office. A former Marine and 4th-degree black belt, he was known for being strict and direct. He stopped in the center of the mat, clapped twice loudly, and shouted, "Line up! There's a regional tournament coming up, and I don't want anyone losing because of overconfidence or weakness." Everyone shouted back, "Yes, coach," and quickly formed rows. But Brett's eyes drifted toward the elderly woman. He frowned and walked over. "Ma'am," Brett said loudly in front of everyone, "this is a training area. If you're not a student's parent or a participant, I'm afraid you're sitting in the wrong spot." A few chuckles rippled through the room. Some students glanced back at the woman with half pity, half mockery. She didn't respond immediately. She simply stood up slowly, her eyes fixed on Brett. "I came here to train," she said, her voice low but clear, each word pronounced as though each breath had been honed through the years. "I've observed long enough these past 3 months. Today, I want to step onto the mat." The entire dojo fell silent for a few seconds. Then one young student burst out laughing. "Train with who?" "The orthopedic doctor. Please don't do that to the old lady." Another sneered. "Someone call an ambulance just in case." Brett also chuckled, though he tried to keep a straight face. "Do you know I used to fight MMA? This isn't a place for jokes. Unless you want to be a demonstration for my class." "Then let's make a deal," she interrupted. "If I last 1 minute, you let me train. If I don't, I'll leave. No one loses face. And if you make me fall," Brett taunted. She smiled faintly, her gaze deep like a dry well in winter. "Then you invite me into the advanced training class." Laughter exploded like a wave. Brett shrugged, then turned to a student with a camera. "Film this. We'll use it for instructional material." The two faced each other at the center of the mat. Ms. Mildred's small-framed salt and pepper hair still holding a towel in her hands, without a hint of trembling. Brett, nearly 2 heads taller, fists clenched, ready to end this act with one gentle strike. "Begin!" The command rang out. Brett threw a quick jab, almost playful, but she didn't back away. She tilted her head just enough for the punch to miss by a hair. A few small oohs came from the students, Brett frowned and followed up with a side kick, this time aiming for her waist. But again, she simply rotated her hips slightly, dodging like wind through fingers. The third strike, then the fourth, followed by a flurry of combinations. Brett began to get angry. Each strike was faster and stronger, but Ms. Mildred remained silent, not retaliating, not even blocking. She only shifted her body, stepped back half a step, moved forward a beat, her eyes never leaving his chest. In a flash, as Brett lunged with a left hook, she placed the towel on the mat, stepped forward half a pace, and gently touched her knee to the swinging arm. Thud. The sound echoed. Brett lost balance. His body weight lurched forward uncontrollably, and he fell, right in the center of the mat. The entire dojo was stunned into silence. Ms. Mildred stood still, not smiling, not a word of triumph. She simply bowed her head slightly in the tradition of martial discipline. "I didn't come here to defeat anyone," she said, "just to remind you that true strength doesn't lie in the punch, but in the stillness after the strike." For a moment, it felt as if the Iron Fist dojo stopped breathing. A new era had just begun, led by someone they had never considered strong enough. The atmosphere inside Iron Fist dojo after Coach Brett Kingston's fall was unlike any previous training session. The silence after the thud still lingered like an invisible mist spreading into every corner of the ceiling. Ms. Mildred stood there, not arrogant, not flustered. She simply bowed in the traditional martial arts manner, then quietly returned to her seat as if nothing had happened. Brett lay on the mat for a few seconds. He wasn't injured, just a light scrape on one elbow, but the greater wound was to his pride. In the eyes of the 20 students standing around, he was no longer the unbeatable coach, and he knew it. But Brett was also a former soldier. He understood that failure was unavoidable. The issue wasn't falling, but whether one had the courage to face why they fell. He stood up, brushed off his hands, then nodded slightly toward Ms. Mildred. A small gesture, but also the beginning of something greater. "All right," Brett said, his voice more subdued. "Training's ending early today. You're dismissed." Some students left quickly, but most stayed gathered in small clusters. Then, as if the entire class suddenly remembered something, all eyes turned toward Janelle, the white blonde-haired student holding a phone. Janelle had recorded the match. No one had asked her to. She did it on instinct, out of curiosity, expecting to watch the coach quickly take down the elderly woman. But the truth had turned out very differently. Now in her hands was a clip barely 60 seconds long, showing Coach Brett falling not because he was struck, but because of himself. "You gonna delete that?" a student asked quietly. Janelle looked at the screen, then looked up at Brett. No one said a word. Brett looked at her for a few seconds, then turned away. No nod, no shake of the head. And in that silence, Janelle's finger didn't press delete. She tapped send, sending it to the dojo's private group chat. That evening, the clip spread like wildfire. At first only among the 28 students of Iron Fist, then rapidly shared across Instagram, TikTok, Reddit. Captions began popping up: "Elderly lady drops black belt coach without throwing a punch." "What technique is this? Looks like a wuxia movie. Is this fake? That fall looks staged. No way. Did she predict his move? What's her name? Anyone know by 11 p.m.? That night, the clip had over 32,000 views. Some people mocked it. Others began analyzing every movement, every angle of Ms. Mildred's posture, each subtle step. One anonymous account even made a slow-motion version with notes: "Hip rotation 8 degrees shifts opponent's axis." The next morning, Brett arrived at the dojo early as usual. But this time he saw 4 new students waiting outside, all there for the same reason. They said, "There's an old lady here who just taught the world about stillness," one of them said, smiling shyly. "We'd like to see if we can learn that." Brett sighed. He wasn't sure whether to feel happy or uneasy. He wasn't even sure what he felt: ashamed for having underestimated her, or grateful for having witnessed something extraordinary. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in the southern suburbs of Houston, Ms. Mildred was sipping tea. Her hand still held the old towel from the previous day's training. On the table in front of her was a flip phone, no social media, no camera, but she didn't need it to know what was happening. The doorbell rang. It was Brett. He stood at the door holding a card, not an invitation, an apology. "I don't know how you did what you did yesterday, but I know I was wrong. I'd like to invite you, if you're willing, to share some basic techniques with the class." She didn't answer right away. She simply poured more tea into his cup. Brett sat in silence, his eyes fixed on her hands, hands that didn't tremble, hands without the calluses of a combat-hardened fighter, yet radiating an inexplicable authority. "You know, my father once asked to teach at your old dojo," she said, still not looking up. Brett froze. "Elijah Carter," he whispered. "Yes, the name that was rejected for not being modern enough, not strong enough, not masculine enough." Brett clenched his hand slightly. Now he understood why her movements resembled those in the grainy martial arts clips he'd seen back in college videos of an older black man training in a warehouse labeled with small text, "Elijah Carter, Silent Combat." Before he could speak, Ms. Mildred stood up and took a wooden box from the cabinet. Inside was a stack of old handwritten notebooks, filled with pencil sketches and diagrams illustrating evasion stances, axis control, and leveraging an opponent's natural movements. "My father called it silent combat," she said. "As for me, I've only learned half of it." Brett looked up. For the first time, his eyes held genuine respect. "Would you teach me?" Ms. Mildred neither nodded nor shook her head. She simply smiled, the smile of someone who knows it's time to stop holding back. 2 days after the shocking match between Ms. Mildred and Coach Brett, Iron Fist Dojo felt like it had just gone through a silent earthquake. No shattering sounds, no dust clouds, but every gaze had changed. Instead of huddling together to debate newly learned techniques, students now whispered about the silver-haired woman in the pale blue t-shirt who always sat quietly in the corner, the one no one had cared about before now becoming the center of attention. Coach Brett no longer avoided the subject. He had officially invited Ms. Mildred back to the dojo as a special guest, asking her to demonstrate traditional evasion techniques every Saturday. Although she hadn't agreed to teach, she continued to show up standing among the students, observing and occasionally demonstrating with subtle but commanding movements. Young students, especially the girls, started approaching her to ask about force harmonization and still movement terms that had previously only existed in ancient martial arts texts, but not everyone supported her presence. Tyler Brennan, the top student at Iron Fist, a third-degree black belt and 3-time regional champion, made no effort to hide his displeasure. Tyler was 22 tall and heavily built, once the pride of the dojo. Every one of his kicks landed like a hammer blow. Every time he entered the ring, he dropped his opponent in under 2 minutes. He was seen as Coach Brett's successor and the future of Iron Fist. And now he was being overshadowed by an old woman, no belt, no competition history, never formally trained in the modern system. "This is a joke," Tyler said loudly during a break, seeing a group of students re-watching the video of Ms. Mildred making Brett fall, a clumsy fall getting blown up like it's some legend. "If that's martial arts, then I'm a yoga instructor." A few laughed awkwardly. Others stayed silent. The mood in the dojo was splitting. Brett heard it. He walked over, trying to keep things civil. "Tyler, people are learning something new. No one's denying your achievements, but humility is something every martial artist needs. I don't need to learn how to slip past a punch." "Gently," Tyler said, lips tight. "Martial arts is about attacking, about winning. My kick can break bones. What can she do besides stand there and shrug?" The whole dojo froze as Tyler suddenly turned toward the corner of the room. Ms. Mildred was standing there, still holding her old towel, silently observing as always. "You," Tyler called out loudly, his tone unmistakably provocative. "I challenge you to the mat, in front of everyone, to prove one thing: martial arts isn't mime." The room went dead silent. Mildred didn't respond immediately. She slowly stepped into the center of the green mat, the ceiling lights casting a glow on her silver hair like moonlight on a lake's surface. She looked at Tyler. "What is it you want to prove that this dojo still honors real strength, not some stage for an outsider's show?" Brett stepped forward, about to intervene. "Tyler, that's enough. Ms. Mildred doesn't need to. I accept," she cut in, her voice calm. A collective gasp rose in the dojo. Brett fell silent, then sighed. He knew this moment would come eventually. Tyler smirked. "No points, no time limit. Ends when one of us can't continue." She nodded. "I accept, but I have one condition." "What now?" Tyler frowned. "No one is allowed to laugh, no matter who falls." A brief hush. Brett slowly stepped onto the mat. "I'll referee." Students gathered into a circle, eyes tense, phones secretly switched on to record. Tyler took off his jacket, stepped onto the mat in a white gi neatly tied with his black belt. He exhaled deeply, stepping firmly as if preparing for an MMA bout. Ms. Mildred, still in her simple blue t-shirt, just set her towel aside. She didn't warm up. She simply closed her eyes, breathed gently, and stood still like a stone pillar in the wind. "Begin," Brett shouted. Tyler charged like a tiger, launching a high roundhouse kick at lightning speed. Ms. Mildred didn't dodge in the usual reflexive direction. She stepped forward a short beat, causing the kick to overshoot in the blink of an eye. No one saw clearly what she did, but Tyler staggered slightly. He turned instantly, launching a hand combo left-right knee in rapid succession, but none of the strikes landed. She moved, as if breathing guided her steps. The entire dojo held its breath. Tyler began to pant. And then, as he unleashed a powerful right hook, Ms. Mildred shifted her stance, swung her arm without touching him, just realigned her shoulder axis, and Tyler fell. No one could believe it. The dojo's strongest fighter lay sprawled on the mat, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling, mouth open, as if he couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Ms. Mildred stood still, not the slightest bit triumphant. "I didn't come here to win," she said. "I came to show you if your strength comes from muscle, then your weakness lies there too." Tyler said nothing, but for the first time his gaze was no longer proud. No one left the dojo immediately after the match between Tyler Brennan and Ms. Mildred Carter. Although it lasted just over 3 minutes, it felt as if the entire room had witnessed a historic moment. Tyler was still lying on the mat. His eyes stared at the ceiling, as if trying to understand how he had fallen, not from being hit, but from being unable to even touch his opponent. An elderly woman, nearly 80 years old, wearing only a blue t-shirt, no belt, and using no strength. "She made me fall without touching me," he whispered as if talking to himself. Coach Brett walked over and extended a hand to Tyler, but he didn't take it right away. Tyler sat up, steadied himself, and stood on his own, slightly unbalanced. The entire dojo remained silent. No one dared to applaud. No one dared to laugh. Even those who had mocked Ms. Mildred now simply looked down at the mat, embarrassed. A female student stepped forward. It was Janelle, the one who had filmed the match between Ms. Mildred and Brett. "Tyler, are you okay?" Tyler didn't answer. He just looked over at Ms. Mildred, standing at the edge of the mat, with the same demeanor as always, calm, neither proud nor pitying. "No," he said quietly, "I'm not hurt. But everything else, it's no longer the same." 3 days later, Tyler showed up at the dojo in the evening after official training hours. He carried a backpack and a sheet of paper. Brett was mopping the floor when he saw Tyler walk in. "You thinking of quitting?" Brett asked, slightly concerned. Tyler shook his head. "No, I'm asking to start over." Brett frowned. "But not in the old class," Tyler continued. "I want to learn from the person who made me fall, without a punch." He opened his backpack and took out a notebook. On the first page was a handwritten title, "Carter Style, Lesson 1, Stand Firm Before Yourself." Brett said nothing. He nodded. The next afternoon, Ms. Mildred received a handwritten note tucked inside a box of pastries left at her door. "I'm sorry for underestimating you, but if you're willing, I want to start over from the beginning, as a student, as someone becoming new. Tyler." She didn't reply. But that evening, when Tyler came to her house, a modest apartment in East Houston, she was already waiting at the door. Still holding her old towel, she said only one sentence: "If you want to truly learn, start by mopping the floor." In the following weeks, after official hours at Iron Fist, Tyler helped Ms. Mildred clean out the old warehouse that once served as her father Elijah Carter's training and teaching space. The place had been abandoned for over 20 years. The tin roof was full of holes, the walls were peeling, the tiled floor was mossy green, but in the center of the room was a rolled-up straw mat still neatly folded, and a small photo frame hanging loosely, the portrait of an elderly black man wearing a beret, eyes that seemed to pierce through time. "This was my first teacher," Mildred said, her voice soft as the wind. "He didn't want to teach fighters. He wanted to teach those who knew how to step back." Tyler didn't fully understand, but he didn't argue. He simply bowed his head and swept the floor. After 2 weeks, the room looked transformed. Tyler's old friends began dropping by. Some came to help, others just stood watching, curious. Then a girl came, Emma, once a lower-level student at Iron Fist, who had quit after dislocating her shoulder in a match with Tyler. She timidly asked, "Do you accept cowards here?" Ms. Mildred simply handed her a towel and pointed to the floor. "Start with your breath." 2 months later, the Carter Dojo officially opened. No large signboard, just a piece of wood hanging by the door that read Carter Dojo. No competition, no belts, only learning how not to fear yourself. The first class had only 5 people. Tyler, Emma, a 9-year-old boy with a left leg disability, a man in his 50s who used to be a firefighter, and an Asian woman who had survived domestic abuse. They sat in a circle on the floor. No uniforms, no grand titles for instructors. Mildred walked in, eyes calm, her back slightly hunched but her stride steady. "You're not here to fight," she said. "You're here to learn how not to fight and still not be defeated." Meanwhile, back at Iron Fist, Dojo coach Brett hung a new photo on the wall next to the medals and championship trophies. It was a photo of Ms. Mildred standing next to Tyler with his hand holding a notebook labeled Day 1. Below the photo was a quote, "Strength doesn't lie in striking, but in not being pulled into where striking becomes necessary." Elijah Carter. Every afternoon at the small dojo named Carter Dojo, one could witness scenes unlike any other martial arts school in the city. A disabled boy practicing how to balance on one leg through deep breathing, a single mother learning to sit in silence, and at the center of the circle, the silver-haired old woman in her faded blue t-shirt, gently reminding each person, "Listen to gravity, don't resist it." There were no shouts, no punches, no one fighting to be the strongest. And yet the story of that place began to spread beyond the boundaries of the poor East Houston neighborhood, farther than Tyler or even Ms. Mildred herself had imagined. It all started with a 90-second video secretly recorded by a parent capturing a Carter Dojo student dodging 3 consecutive strikes from a senior martial artist during an inter-dojo exchange without ever striking back. The 14-year-old boy simply retreated, rotated his body, lowered his center, and his opponent lost balance on their own. The video was posted on a major martial arts forum. The title of the post read, "Traditional Martial Arts Revived. 14-year-old student controls the match without fighting." At first, the comments were full of astonishment. "Never seen evasion like this. What style is this, Wing Chun Aikido? No, they call it Carter style, the martial art of stillness. Who's Carter?" Then gradually the comments shifted. "This would never work in real combat. This is pandering, not martial arts. Teaching weak people how to live in fantasy. Dangerous to make people believe they can survive without fighting back." And then, someone very specific spoke up. Roderick Kane, founder and CEO of the Vanguard Combat Institute, left a short but cold comment. "I've seen enough. If the person behind Carter Dojo believes evasion is a solution, I invite them to step onto a real mat." Roderick Kane was the complete opposite of Ms. Mildred. A former Special Forces veteran, he built Vanguard from scratch, turning it into the most expensive martial arts training center in Texas. There, martial arts meant speed, power, striking first, and finishing fast. Kane believed in efficiency, dominance, total victory. He despised all meditative martial philosophy, and once declared in an interview, "To win without fighting is the most beautiful lie of the century." When he saw the video and heard the name Mildred Carter, he could not sit still. 3 days later, an official challenge letter was delivered directly to Ms. Mildred, both by mail and as a CC'd email to every dojo affiliated with the State Martial Arts Association. On the envelope was Vanguard Combat Institute's logo and a bold headline: "Exhibition Challenge. Invitation Carter Dojo versus Vanguard Combat. No points, no judging, no technique restrictions." Inside was a special clause: "If Carter Dojo loses, the Carter style will not be recognized as a legitimate martial arts school within the state system." Brett was the first to read the message in the internal group chat. He went straight to Ms. Mildred's apartment, where she was having tea with Emma and Tyler after a training session. "What are you going to do?" Brett asked. "What else is there to do?" Tyler spoke up. "We can't refuse." "We don't have to win," Mildred said gently. "We only need not to be broken. But if we lose," Emma said anxiously, "we lose our name. They'll erase Carter from the martial arts registry. Everything you and Mr. Elijah built will vanish." "My dear," she said, eyes glinting with a faint smile, "they can erase a name from paper, but not from the hearts of those who stood tall because of it." 1 week later, the match was scheduled at the Virginia State Martial Arts Stadium, a venue known for hosting inter-regional tournaments. Posters appeared everywhere: Vanguard versus Carter, a battle between two eras. On the poster were images of Roderick Kane in black armor, his face like cold steel, and Ms. Mildred, silver-haired, barefoot, holding her familiar towel, staring straight ahead like moonlight. The media took notice. A local station invited Tyler for an interview. Questions were raised. Can an elderly woman really stand against a modern warrior? Does the art of evasion have a place in this era? Vanguard has defeated 3 dojos in the past 3 years. Does Carter stand a chance? But Ms. Mildred didn't give interviews. She didn't appear on television. She simply continued teaching her students how to maintain balance when pulled, how to breathe deeply, when afraid, how to stand back up without bracing. The night before the match, in a small room behind the dojo, Ms. Mildred opened an old wooden chest. Inside was Elijah's silver-gray gi, neatly folded and preserved with 2 layers of linen cloth. Tyler sat beside her, holding his notebook, hands trembling. "I'm scared," he admitted. "So am I," she smiled. "But you're still going to step onto the mat, not to win," she said, "but to protect one thing, that there are ways to live without needing to be the strongest." The Virginia State Martial Arts Stadium had never been this crowded. Over 2,000 spectators filled every seat. Media outlets, martial artists, fans, and even people who had never practiced martial arts gathered out of curiosity to witness the unprecedented and elderly woman, nearly 80 years old, facing the top martial arts master of Vanguard Combat, Roderick Kane. The arena was set in the center of the circular grandstand, like a Roman Colosseum, but instead of blood and swords, white and blue, LED lights swept across the floor like a ceremonial path. On 2 large screens flanking the arena, the faces of the 2 competitors appeared. On one side, Kane, chiseled features, eyes cold as stone. On the other, Mildred, neatly trimmed silver hair, pale blue t-shirt, barefoot, holding a frayed towel. No one believed this would be a fair fight. Many came expecting a quick finish. In the waiting room, Kane tightened his gloves, punched lightly into his palm, his black combat suit rigged with force sensors. His gear was specially designed to measure strike speed angle and impact force. His assistant entered and whispered, "National cameras are ready. Do you want to give a pre-match message?" Kane didn't look up. "I don't talk to cameras. I let my fists do the talking." In Mildred's waiting room, it was completely silent. No one spoke. Tyler stood beside her holding a small bag containing the silver-gray GI. But Ms. Mildred didn't wear it. She still chose her old t-shirt and simple slacks like every day. "You don't have to step onto that mat," Tyler said softly. "No one's asking you to carry all this." "My son," she smiled, "when you realize you have nothing to prove, that's when you're strong enough to step out." She left the room, each step slow but firm, walking down the quiet hallway like an old lion. No roar, no show yet, every hair on her body declaring, "I have lived enough not to fear falling." To the ring, the MC's voice rang out amid the stage lights and the constant clicking of cameras. Kane stepped out first, tall, muscular, moving like a combat machine. He bent down, knocked his fist against the mat, a deep, resonant thud. Then Ms. Mildred appeared small in the spotlight, with no effects, no music, only gazes. And among them many were once mocking, now holding their breath. The entire stadium fell silent as the two faced each other. The referee stepped in exhibition match. No points, no time limit, intervention only if one side cannot continue. "Are both sides ready?" Kane nodded. Ms. Mildred simply closed her eyes and opened them again, as if greeting herself. The match began. Kane didn't hesitate. He charged in, opening with a low sidekick, textbook lightning fast. Everyone thought it would end there, but Ms. Mildred didn't retreat. She stepped forward half a beat, bent down, and the kick skimmed across her back like wind over water. The entire crowd let out a unified, "Oh!" Kane spun, launching a stronger, tighter right-hand strike, but she merely tilted her shoulder at the perfect angle, letting the punch pass through empty space. At the technical desk, the sensors displayed strike force 319 newtons, speed 38 km/h, effectiveness 0%. Kane stepped back now, cautious. He switched tactics, transitioning to a combo punch, knee, elbow, left hook, but every strike missed, not because Ms. Mildred was fast, but because she was no longer where the strike landed before it even arrived. The audience held its breath. Some began sitting upright. For the first time, they weren't waiting to see who got hit, but how she could evade an entire sequence without dancing around or fleeing. Kane began to sweat. Beads formed on the back of his neck. He had never fought someone who didn't strike back. Her silence became a mirror reflecting his own fury. He shouted, launching a full-force roundhouse kick, a strike capable of ending any professional bout. But Mildred didn't dodge the usual way. She stepped straight in as if inviting the blow, then tilted her body just slightly and gently touched her knee to Kane's shin. Kane lost his axis. His entire body weight surged forward with no anchor. He fell. The stadium erupted. Sensor data displayed impact none. Fall trigger, loss of balance. Total force received 0 Roderick Kane lay on the mat. For the first time in his competitive career, he fell without anyone touching him. He opened his eyes and saw Ms. Mildred standing there, not triumphant. She didn't approach, didn't speak. She simply looked at him with eyes, quiet as the sea. He slowly sat up. The referee didn't need to say a word. Everyone had seen clearly. Kane stood up slowly, his eyes still locked on the woman who had just shaken the foundation of his entire worldview. He removed his gloves, unwrapped his wristbands, untied his shoes. Then he knelt. "I was wrong," Kane said into the microphone. His voice choked slightly. "I used to think only strength could preserve life, but today I understand. Sometimes not resisting is the strongest thing." Ms. Mildred stepped forward and bowed. "No one was wrong," she replied. "There are just some battles that don't need a winner, only someone who wakes up." 3 days after the match, major newspapers across Texas and the United States couldn't stop repeating 3 words, Mildred Carter style. From specialized martial arts forums to the lifestyle columns of major publications like Houston Tribune, The Atlantic Martial, and Martial Spirit Weekly, people were constantly analyzing, debating, pushing back, and marveling. How could a nearly 80-year-old woman take down a symbol of modern martial strength without throwing a single strike? Even more astonishing to the public was the attitude of the defeated Roderick Kane. His kneeling, removing his gloves, and apologizing right there on the mat was not only a shock to the martial arts world, but a symbol of something unprecedented, the largest ego bowing to something he once considered meaningless. At Vanguard Dojo, the atmosphere shifted quickly. Banners like KO or nothing were taken down. Some students started requesting more meditation classes, passive technique workshops, and even breathing sessions. One of the younger instructors whispered in the break room, "I've never seen anyone make Master Kane kneel, let alone in front of the whole country." Roderick didn't teach any classes immediately afterward. He withdrew in silence, but surprisingly, he didn't walk away. On the contrary, he quietly showed up at Carter Dojo. That day, Ms. Mildred was sitting with Tyler and Emma after a class. A few kids were playing with a yoga ball out on the cement yard. A black pickup truck pulled up in front of the dojo. Roderick stepped out, not in uniform, just a simple button-down shirt and sneakers. In his hand was a small box of tea. "Not sure if you drink this kind," he said sincerely. Ms. Mildred smiled. "Do you know how many cultures consider bringing tea to an elder's house a symbol of peace?" He chuckled softly. "I've learned now." Roderick sat down on the mat with them. No cameras, no crowd. Just 4 people, a teapot, and silence that was no longer empty, but a form of shared understanding. "I still don't fully understand what you did," Roderick said. "You don't need to," she replied. "You only need to feel it. I used to think there were only 2 states, win or lose. And now I think there's a third. Awakening." News of Roderick visiting Carter Dojo spread like wildfire. Martial arts schools across the state began sending requests. "We want a technical exchange session. We want to learn how to evade without being vulnerable." "Is there an official curriculum for the Carter style?" Brett from Iron Fist was the first to speak up publicly. "We will integrate the Carter centering method as a mandatory unit for all new students." Carter Dojo's YouTube channel, originally created just to share light exercises for the elderly, suddenly jumped from 300 subscribers to 140,000 in just 1 week. A 3-minute video titled "An Elderly Woman Teaches You How Not to Fall in a World That Keeps Knocking You Down" reached 4.2 million views in 48 hours. At the same time, the Texas Martial Arts Council held an emergency meeting. Under pressure from the public and experts, they reconsidered Carter Dojo's application, which had previously been denied twice for lacking a formal competitive system and insufficient real-world application. And in a full member vote of all 13 council members, the result was announced: Carter's style is officially recognized as a traditional martial arts system in the state of Texas, authorized for instruction training and lineage transmission under the federal network. On the certificate was the line for strength beyond striking. Ms. Mildred didn't throw a party, no announcements. She simply sat down to write a letter, not to the authorities, not to the students, but to Elijah Carter, her father, the man who had once been rejected, mocked, and lost his faith in martial justice. She placed the letter in a small wooden box alongside his old silver belt, then buried it beneath the bamboo tree in front of the dojo. The next day, she gathered all her students, not to celebrate, but to talk. "We weren't recognized because we beat someone," she said. "We were recognized because we didn't strike and still stood strong. And if you want to keep that alive beyond any title, remember this: never turn Carter style into a weapon. Let it be a path." That evening, Emma went home and placed the Carter-style certification letter on the dinner table for her mother, a housewife who had once endured abuse in silence to see. Her mother picked it up, read it slowly. Her eyes grew misty. "This is martial arts." "Yes," Emma replied. "It's the way I can protect myself without needing to hit back." Since the day Carter's style was officially recognized, people flowed into the dojo like an unstoppable current. Some came to learn, some came to film, some came to interview, some came just to check in. Ms. Mildred still taught as she always had, sitting in the center of the circle, having everyone breathe together before making any movements. But the number of students kept growing. Those who once mopped the floor with her now had to teach newcomers. The old cement room was beginning to overflow. A media company offered to collaborate. "We want to produce a documentary series, The Carter Way, Strength in Stillness. You'll be the central figure." Each episode could get up to 2 million views. Ms. Mildred declined immediately, but the younger students began discussing, "Maybe we could spread this faster. We need funding to open more branches." Isn't the goal to bring Carter to more people? A group within the dojo led by a student named Kellen proposed, "Let's create Carter Dojo franchise, a nationwide chain. With training materials, video tutorials, uniforms, badges, instructor certification, legal professional with clear direction." Tyler disagreed. "We can't turn this into a product. It's not a restaurant chain." Emma hesitated too. If everyone teaches Carter in their own way, then how is it still Carter? Day by day, the dojo began to split into 2 schools of thought. One side wanted to preserve the original spirit, no belts, no ranks, no branding. The other wanted to professionalize and scale it into a nationwide educational system. Some even proposed applying for government funding to introduce it into schools and prisons as a form of psychological therapy. Kellen printed a proposal and presented it to the entire dojo. He spoke like an executive. "This isn't just the story of one old woman anymore. This is an educational model, a national legacy." At that moment, Ms. Mildred sat silently. Her hand still held her teacup as usual. As the debate grew heated, she stood up and gently asked, "Do you all remember why Carter was recognized?" No one answered. "Because we didn't fight to win, but because we dared to step into the ring without fighting." A few days later, a letter from the Texas Department of Education arrived. "We would like to include the Carter centering method into the physical education curriculum for middle and high schools as a model for teaching nonviolent response skills, emotional regulation, and post-bullying psychological recovery." Ms. Mildred sat for hours reading that letter, saying nothing. Meanwhile, Kellen and his team had already begun designing a website, hiring media representatives, creating a logo, and registering the trademark Carter Method, TM. Tyler was furious. He confronted Kellen. "What are you doing? This isn't what Ms. Mildred wants. And you think she'll live forever to keep this locked in a cramped room?" Kellen shot back. "We need to think bigger. The world needs this." During one class, a new boy, 12 years old, orphaned, sat alone in the corner. When asked why he wasn't joining, he said, "I don't have money for the tuition. There's a price list now." Ms. Mildred turned to Tyler. He lowered his head. Then she turned to Kellen and the assistant instructors. They were silent. At that moment, Ms. Mildred pulled out a blank sheet of paper. On it, she wrote one line: "Carter wasn't born to have a price. Carter was born to have meaning." That evening, she called a meeting with all students and assistants. No director's chair, no presentation board, just a single mat in the center of the room, like the very first day. "Tomorrow," she said, "I will stop teaching for a month." The room stirred, not because I'm tired, but because I want to see, does Carter still live in you if I'm not here? During that month, she continued, "Don't open new classes. Don't film videos. Don't plan expansions. You have only one task: befriend the newcomers. Don't teach. Just sit with them." That quiet month began as a challenge. No one was allowed to instruct. No one wrote lesson plans. Those who were once burning with ambition to grow the brand were now forced to listen. They sat with new students, drank tea, listened to the story of a single mother who had suffered from depression, a boy who had been bullied, an elderly man who once thought about ending his life. No one demanded they learn martial arts. All they needed was to feel like they weren't invisible. On the final day of that month, Ms. Mildred returned to the dojo. All the students stood in line waiting. No one said a word. No one presented a development plan. Only one thing was offered. Tyler, representing everyone, handed her a piece of paper with handwriting, "We understand now." Carter isn't something to spread. Carter is something to live. She nodded. Her eyes glistened, but her expression remained calm, as it always had. 1 week after Ms. Mildred returned to the dojo, a handwritten letter arrived with no return address, just a few scribbled lines. "I don't deserve to say the name Carter, but I think I'm ready to relearn how to be human. Would you give me a chance?" Ms. Mildred read the letter, nodded quietly, and placed it on the small wooden shelf beneath the portrait of Mr. Elijah. Beneath it she wrote in pencil, "The one willing to start over is stronger than the one who has never been wrong." The writer of the letter was Roderick Kane. No more black gi, no more honor belts. Kane showed up at Carter Dojo in a worn shirt, a backpack slung over his shoulder, tousled hair and eyes heavy with fatigue. He didn't come to learn martial arts. He came to ask Ms. Mildred to help him open a place like this, somewhere no one would expect a juvenile detention center. "That center once invited me to teach restraint techniques," Kane said. "But those kids don't need chokeholds. They need to breathe. And no one teaches that better than you." At first, the facility's board strongly opposed it. Carter style. An old woman meditating young offenders need discipline, not philosophy. But Kane didn't back down. He sent them the video of his match with Mildred, sent psychological reports of 3 teens who had participated in a short centering class at the dojo, where after just 3 weeks, their night terrors disappeared. Eventually, the detention center agreed to a pilot. The first Carter class behind bars had 6 participants, 3 of whom were labeled high risk for reoffending. The first class involved no strikes, no KIAI shouts. No one was asked why they were in jail. There was only one lesson: if you can stand upright without bracing, you can live without fighting. A 16-year-old boy named Luis asked, "But if I don't fight, who's gonna fear me?" Ms. Mildred looked at him, her eyes without judgment. "Do you need others to fear you in order to live?" Luis said nothing. His eyes welled up. He had never been asked that before. After 6 weeks, something unexpected happened. 3 out of the 6 students wrote apology letters to their victims' families, something they had repeatedly refused to do before, even under pressure. One of them, Malik, wrote, "I don't know how to say sorry with words, so I'll learn to say it by not repeating myself." Around the same time, Tyler and Emma were invited to join a nonprofit project at a high school once notorious for bullying in South Houston. The school wanted to introduce the Carter centering model into homeroom periods, but didn't call it martial arts. They feared parental backlash. Tyler smiled and replied, "We never called ourselves martial artists. We just learned how not to fall in front of what hurts us." The first class had 12 students. Among them was a shy Asian girl named Lynn, who had been bullied to the point she stopped speaking. Throughout the session, she said nothing, only watched. But at the end of the class, Lynn quietly placed a note on Emma's desk. It read, "I didn't think someone like me could stand up, but I saw that old lady stand without shaking. So I thought, maybe I can too." News began to spread, but this time not from the media, but from people who had been changed. A mother told her neighbor that her child now slept soundly after sitting quietly with a strange teacher who wouldn't let them talk. A student recorded a vlog saying, "One Carter class helped me stop yelling at myself." And then something unexpected happened. A second Carter Dojo opened, not by Ms. Mildred nor by Tyler or Kane, but by the very person who once treated her as a joke. Kellen, the former student who had tried to commercialize Carter, but later withdrew. After conflict, quietly returned to his hometown in Mississippi. There he opened a small training center called the Quiet Route. On the sign there was no word for martial arts, no black belt, no image of a person throwing a kick. Just one quote, "A tree doesn't need to roar to grow." And on opening day, the first person to step into the class wasn't a muscular young man, but a 72-year-old woman who had come to learn how to stand up again after losing her husband. Back at the original Carter Dojo, Ms. Mildred stood outside looking at the bamboo tree by the entrance, the one under which she had buried her letter to Elijah. The wind blew gently, the leaves rustled. Tyler came beside her. "You know," he said, "people everywhere are starting Carter-style classes now. But no one's fighting over the name anymore, because they understand," she replied. "Carter isn't a name. Carter is a way to exist." One October afternoon, after a light rain, the dojo courtyard still shimmered with puddles reflecting faint light. Yellow bamboo leaves fell one by one onto the old stone steps. Tyler was packing up floor mats. Emma was cleaning the windows, and Ms. Mildred sat on her familiar wooden chair, holding a cup of hot tea. Her eyes drifted toward the gate, as if waiting for something, or perhaps waiting for nothing at all. "Do you think one day this dojo will be gone?" Tyler asked. She smiled gently. "Only things stuck to brick walls disappear. What clings to people lives wherever they go." The dojo gate suddenly opened. A boy around 8 years old stood there. An oversized gray hoodie hung from his shoulders, arms wrapped around a worn-out backpack. His curly hair drooped over half his forehead. He wasn't accompanied by an adult. Tyler stepped forward. "Can I help you, kid?" The boy didn't answer right away. He just looked directly at Ms. Mildred and asked, "Do you teach people who have nobody here?" The whole dojo courtyard fell silent. Ms. Mildred set down her cup. She didn't ask what nobody meant because she understood. It was how a child names loneliness when they don't know the words for it yet. She stood up and stepped in front of the boy. "Here," she said slowly, "we don't ask where you're from. We only ask, do you want to stand strong?" The boy nodded softly. "Then you've come to the right place." In the days that followed, the boy named Noah became part of the dojo. No one knew much about him, only whispers from the community center. He lived with his grandmother. His mother had passed and his father was missing. Noah didn't talk much, didn't smile often, but there was one thing everyone noticed: he learned how to breathe deeply, very quickly. In one class, while Tyler was teaching the Quiet Route exercise, Noah suddenly stood up, walked to the center of the room, and bowed deeply before everyone. No one understood what had just happened, but afterward he sat back down and whispered, "I don't want anyone to fall because of me anymore." It was the first time Noah had ever spoken a full sentence. One evening after class, Ms. Mildred sat alone in the photo room. On the wall were old pictures, a young Elijah Carter herself as a student, the photo of the dojo on the day it was officially recognized, and most recently pictures of Kane, Tyler, Emma, and even Kellen. Noah stepped in. "Grandma Mildred," he said softly, "if I grow up one day, can I teach this too?" Ms. Mildred looked at him. For the first time she saw in the child's eyes not fear, not lack, but a quiet light. The kind of light Elijah once had, the light she once had, the light generations had preserved with their entire lives. She didn't answer right away. She turned to the desk, opened an old drawer, and took out a small wooden box. Inside was a silver fabric belt, faded yellow, with time, the one Elijah had worn until his final day. She placed it on both hands and gave it to Noah. "You don't need to wear this," she said. "Just hold it." Noah received it, eyes wide. "Because the one who holds the belt isn't the best," she continued, "but the one who knows they're carrying part of the soul of those who came before." That night, Ms. Mildred sat down to write what would be the final letter of her life. A letter not addressed to anyone in particular, just lines that felt like she was speaking to herself. If one day someone asks, "Why did you teach martial arts when your back was bent and your knees ached?" Tell them, because there are children who've never heard someone say they deserve to be strong even with just a single breath. If they ask, "What is Carter?" Tell them Carter isn't a punch, isn't a guard stance. Carter is how you walk after the world has knocked you down. And if they ask, "When does the dojo end?" say, "When no one needs to learn how to stand again, then I'll stop teaching." But that day is still far away. 3 months later, Ms. Mildred passed away peacefully in her sleep. No pain, no illness, just that her heart had completed its mission. Her funeral was held at the dojo. No casket placed in the center of the room, just a round mat and a cup of tea in the middle like the old days of class. Students sat around, no loud crying, just silence, a deep breath in and a shared exhale. Noah was the only one who stood up, stepped into the circle, bowed, then opened his small palm, revealing the old silver belt, carefully folded. He placed it on the mat, looked up and said, "I don't know if I'm good enough to hold this yet, but I know someone will come after me. And when they do, I want them to be asked the same question, do you want to stand strong?" And so the journey of Miss Mildred Carter comes to a close, from a quiet old woman mopping the dojo floor to a teacher who inspired an entire generation to learn how to stand up without ever throwing a punch. She left behind no titles, no medals. She left only one simple question: do you want to stand strong? And that very question changed people who once seemed beyond change. If this story touched you, please leave a comment below. What in life once made you want to give up? And what helped you rise again? And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit like, subscribe, and share this video so that more people can be reminded. Strength doesn't lie in the strike. It lies in the courage to rise, even if only through a single breath. We've already picked out a few videos we think you won't want to miss. Let's continue this quiet but powerful journey together in a place where everyone has the right to stand strong, regardless of age, judgment, or past. Wishing you a peaceful day and the strength to believe in what's right, even when the whole world turns its back on it.